And I've been flat out called a liar. I've had people email my management that I'm lying about, whatever, recruiting and whatever on social media. They literally want me fired. They want my head on a platter. It's wild. I have no idea.
The job market has changed since the pandemic, and so have the rules.
What worked 3 years ago no longer works. There's so much more noise out there and so much contradictory advice.
We're here to help you cut past the noise and decode the new rules.
And to guide you to your next opportunity. We're going to give you our shared expertise and help you figure out how to make the most of this post-pandemic talent market.
So join us on this journey if you're open to work. James, we're back.
Not only are we back, we've got Amy Miller back for a second episode.
We've had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with her for an extended over an hour, and we just couldn't stop talking, and we were enjoying every single minute of it. So we decided to bring you some more content from that episode. So we can't wait, and let's jump back in. So Alderson James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA, so I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US, so even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained, and executive search, and they also now do embedded through AJX, so they can do it all.
I see this on LinkedIn all the time and it breaks my heart, but somebody will have had an experience. Well, I applied for this role on Friday and I was rejected Saturday morning. And we rushed to fill the gap. Oh, well, it must be this horrible process and these terrible people behind the scenes and this algorithm and blah, blah, blah. And we rushed to fill this gap when in reality, we don't know. You don't know, I don't know, unless I'm the recruiter on the other end of that organization, I'm not going to know, even with all the knowledge and experience I have. And so I want to, again, just help open people's minds to other possibilities. Well, it could be this. I've seen stuff like that happen. This is one possible explanation. The more that we kind of keep our minds open and understand, to your point, there's different processes, there's different tools, or different ways of doing it. I'm not going to immediately get angry, which serves no one. And I'm not going to write off an otherwise great company. I'm not going to go spend money I don't need to spend on a resume when my resume got me 9 interviews at the other places I've interviewed, applied to or whatever. But that worries me for job seekers. Your mental health is suffering because you are rushing to judgment over things that are either improbable, simply not true, or not backed up by any fact or logic.
I think part of this as well, part of the emergence of the beat the bots, I think, has come from really a cry of frustration from the job search community. People feel like when you get rejected, that we use that term rejection, it doesn't feel good. And it feels like you're not good enough. Yeah. And so it's so much easier to say, I got rejected by a bot who never read me, and I can put all of this kind of frustration and anger onto this kind of concept that doesn't exist.
We need a boogeyman.
And create a living creature in that world, then really kind of focus on saying, I wasn't right. This opportunity wasn't right for me. That is a whole level of mental trickery, because it's so much easier to go down the path of saying, I got automatically rejected. And I even realized, I actually caught myself. I texted someone the other day and said, I just got a auto rejected from this job. And I'm like, hang on, that's not what's happened. I've just it was easier for me to say that than go through the mental jumps of saying, well, I wasn't right in comparison to other candidates, which is the reality of what scenarios. And then that's frustrating, but it's not like an auto rejection. I'm not it wasn't a bot. It was a person that evaluated that. And it's a shame that they didn't evaluate me in a way that was more favorable to me, but they had to make a decision at the end of the day.
Timing is a lot of it, were there 10 other people that just got their application in before you? Was there a referral that came in at the last minute? Did they lose the head count right? I mean, sometimes that happens. Like a company has to make hard decisions about what they're actually going to invest in. And so there are so many things, but that's the other, I would just want one person, because I've been banging this like bot drum for a long time, right? And everybody knows that about me.
And that you fully believe that all bots are taking over recruiting and that they do all our job for us now.
I'm standing behind this guy when the end comes. Okay. I'm with him. All right. Sherman, right? Don't forget me when you take over. No, you're talking to the woman who worked in a Terminator reference into her wedding vows. Okay. I know bots. Okay. True story. But I just want one person, and I've been flat out called a liar. I've had people email my management that I'm lying about, whatever, recruiting and whatever on social media. It's brutal out there, man. My raging fans are, whew. But someone explained to me what benefit I take from saying, no, actually, there's a person behind the scenes and here's how those tools work. Like, how does that help me? Because personally, I would love to be able to say, gosh, that darn algorithm got it again. I'm so sorry I missed it. And yeah, I would have seen it and you would have been great. But that darn algorithm, like, why would I not hide behind that if that was in any way feasible or possible?
And also, how does it help the person that, is so frustrated with the talent market and so disagrees with the honest and free advice that you're giving that they would try and email leadership at Microsoft or Google or Amazon or wherever you happen to be working to try and get you fired?
They literally want me fired. They want my head on a platter. It's wild. I have no idea.
I think
it reminds me
of this like age of anonymity that we work within. That is, it's easier to be angry at you than it is to face this it's quite hard truth that you are not good enough, or that you are not right for this role. It's not that you are not good enough, but you're not right for this role. But it feels like the emotion you're interpreting is I'm not good enough, and therefore it's much easier to say it's your fault. And you are lying and you are misleading me and it's the bot's fault. And why would you lie to me like that? That's an easier feeling to experience and follow through in this, I think, age of Twitter rage and all that sort of jazz. And I'm sorry that that's happened to you as well. I'm conscious we haven't said that, but I'm sorry that you received it.
I appreciate that. Well, and like my husband's even asked me a couple times, like, why do you bother? Like for every 100 people that love you and think you're great, like there's that one jerk. He says it much more emphatically than that. But, he's like, what? It's not worth it. And I was like, yeah, but there's two things. Okay. First of all, there are the people who need that and the people who do respond positively and the people who do have the good experiences. But there's also, and I think a lot of this is growing up as a Gen X woman. I'm still dealing with, gender bias, and I definitely grew up in, even though staffing generally is female dominated, staffing leadership, not so much. So I remember being the only branch manager, the only female branch manager, like 20 some branches at one of the first staffing agencies I worked at. And I was denied a transfer in spite of going and opening the new office and doing an amazing job and like best new office launch in the history of the company. I was told I could not have that location permanently because I was too emotional. So I flew back to California and quit, as one does in that situation in 2001, 2002, maybe, whatever. So like, I do have this, like, I'm not going to let people be abused on my watch. I'm going to push back. I'm going to call out bad behavior. I'm going to call out nonsense. And there is a risk. There is a risk because people will take a screenshot out of context. Well, Amy Miller said this, But you know what? There's a generation of women coming behind me. I have daughters. I have coworkers. I'll just deal with it and never forget a face.
That's amazing,
Amy Miller.
Truly amazing and unfortunate. But
it's pretty wild.
That's a whole other episode.
yeah, pretty wild. But, but I think, again, to Matthew's point, these people are hurting. And there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of like self-doubt or self-loathing that maybe drives some of this. And I think that people make a lot of assumptions. We talked earlier about filling in the gaps, right? What I don't know. So I'm going to make up a narrative. I think that people will look at me from the outside. Oh, well, she's got a job in this economy and she works for a massive organization and she's probably a millionaire and she has all these things. Like, there's a lot of other stuff you don't see. You don't see the loss and the struggles and the things that like my family has dealt with and the personal things that like I am human just like everybody else. I have all the same thoughts, feelings, emotions, and trials that anyone else does. I don't necessarily wear them on my sleeve, but they exist. But people don't see that. I'm one-dimensional on a screen. You see my face, you see my profile, and that's it.
You rarely talk about it, but I saw a post you wrote so beautifully and emotionally about the realities of being a military spouse and what that looked like for your family in the early days. Thank you for your service, but also thank you for sharing what you shared, because people don't see that other side, right? That you didn't always work for a giant tech company and have a comfortable life. No. You were a military spouse, barely surviving.
We were poor. and I mean, we could go all the way back. Like I spent a non-insignificant chunk of my childhood living in a camper with no indoor plumbing. I mean, we were poor, right? And so those are also tying it back to what fuels me. I don't like being hungry, okay? So I've been hungry. I did not enjoy it. And so a lot of that fuels me as well. I want to make sure I don't fall back into that. And I like wanted to break that poverty cycle and break, some of those things that we experienced. And my husband and I grew up together, on the military base. And my uncle was in the military and I lived with them for a period of time. And that's kind of how I got connected to the military life, and then was an Army spouse for a bit as well. But there's just a lot of that. And I've got, like even within my own immediate family, we've had medical things happen, and I won't get into all like the diagnoses and things like that, because I don't talk about my kids on social media, even though they're grown. I don't even post their pictures without permission. But people don't understand that. They don't know that backstory. They don't know all the times we've spent in hospitals and getting MRIs and undergoing surgeries and all the things. Like real life happens to me just as much as it happens to everyone else. So like, if we could all like just remember that before we start, pew-pewing at people, like you don't know what they're going through. And that's the grace I try to extend to job seekers as well, right? Like, oh, they're really angry. They're really upset. Let me try to address this in an empathetic way. I don't always get it right, but I try.
So what gives you hope? What gives you hope about the talent landscape, about where we're headed, about how technology, which I believe will make things better, not worse. Yeah. What keeps you going?
I think we are seeing people starting to see through the noise. I'm seeing a lot. There's a tweet. I think somebody shared it on LinkedIn. Maybe they grabbed like a screen grab, made a meme out of it, but something like, I want AI to do my laundry and wash my dishes, not do other stuff so that I can do like that. And I think people are catching on. Like, I love technology and technological advances. And I was so excited when I got my first computer at work, because I used to have to bug my boss, like, can I please sit up for 5 minutes? I got to write my Seattle Times ad, fax it over to the newspaper, kind of thing in the early days. So I've seen those advances throughout my recruiting career. I started when we were handing out, paper applications on clipboards. And I think that people are starting to recognize that it is a tool. It is not a replacement. It is not a solution. It is not the second coming. It's a tool. And it's going to enable us to bring back more of the human element that we've lost. Because I think we went through a period there where we all became chronically online, and we were all focused on the shiny, and we were all losing track of like the human part of recruiting and HR. And I think people are getting tired of it. Now, it may not last forever. Maybe I'm being overly hopeful, But I think the world is going to start shrinking again, and we're going to start paying more attention to our friends and our colleagues, and we're going to drive more in real life relationships, which is why I love doing things like this. Like, I consider James my friend, even though this is literally the first time we've talked.
I'm going to come to Seattle. We're going to have a really nice lunch.
We're going to hang. It's going to be lovely. But, I think our worlds are going to continue to become more personal in spite of technology. So that gives me hope. I hope I'm not wrong, right? Because again, Terminator, I've seen it a million times. Okay. A lot. But I feel like we're going to get back to that, and I'm excited for that.
I definitely, I think we talked about this with Jim as well, and they're kind of the feeling of that the communication channel with the recruiter is going to have to, yes, there'll be a huge portions of it that'll be automated in the future, but it'll be much more focused around moving away from being an email warrior, which I feel like recruiting is at its like peak email warriorship right now.
Yeah.
And I've been, James, I'd be fascinated to hear your thoughts on this, but I've been going through processes over the last like 6 months or so, and I don't think the recruiter through the process has picked up the phone and organically called me once through any of the processes that I've been through. And I think that's because we are so stuck into the methodology of text as a format. And I think this will now move towards back towards phone. And I think we'll move back towards video interactions as a format, and not scheduling like every single minute of our day, just having like, I'm going to call through my candidates on a Friday afternoon, to let them know where I'm at with the status. Like, all those things will become more important because people will be so frustrated at the volume of emails, text interactions that they'll have. Equally, I think someone, if I spoke to the other day, said, Gen Z, they also not want that at all. Right. And so I think there's going to be an interesting shift where they become the primary kind of buyers in the workforce, i.e. the candidates soon. And they have grown up without being on the phone to anyone ever.
Yeah.
And so how will that change? How will this technology that enables us to communicate at scale now with automation end up influencing our ability to have real relationships with candidates during a process? And I think that is going to be a fascinating journey.
Personalization is the new luxury, right? And technology will enable that. I've been in consumer for a long, long time, and the holy grail has always been this single view of the customer, and we've never been able to get it right. But I do believe very soon we'll be able to have that single view of the candidate. We'll know where they exist in all of their different social spaces. We'll know exactly what their preferences are, and we'll know how to truly personalize to them. And so when we get to like career CRM, that's going to be the next paradigm, I believe.
I love that. And I have preached that. I've done a lot of recruiter training over the years and built courses and things, internally at different companies, and even some external stuff from time to time. I would rather really deeply, intensely go after my top 10 prospects than email blast 1,000. That does not give me the results that I want. So I'm very big on the hyper personalization, and I will use technology. Like, I've done drip campaigns, and I've done, used AI sourcing tools and all the things. Like, I am not afraid of technology, but I'm going to use it in a way that is very much behind the scenes. And you don't even know that I'm using it because I have uber personalized the outreach and the communication and the experience with me. And that's why, again, I'm going to focus so heavily on like those top 5 or 10 per role. Now I've got a lot of roles, right? So it gets big fast, but by really having that intense hyper personalization is so key. I've hired over 500 people since I've been with my current organization. And I remember every single one of them, because it means that much. And I'll run into them in the office. I'm like, oh, Amy, you hired me. I'm so-and-so. I'm like, I know, I remember. How is your mom? Or, oh yeah, you sent me a picture of your dog. Like, I don't remember a lot of stuff. Like, I got to write down my husband's birthday's coming up next, so I better jot that down. But I remember, like, because I do take it that seriously. Like, you're trusting me with your career. You're letting me influence you and hopefully convince you to take this job. I don't want to screw that up. So yeah, I'm all about personalization, and I want the technology and the tools that take the administrative nonsense off of me so that I can spend more time on the phone with people.
We can make it more personal.
And I think the same can be true if you're sitting here as a candidate. I think it's interesting to listen to this as a candidate, just to see like where we are in reality, and you know where the kind of current conversation is across like 3 recruiting leaders, if we can put it in that category, and also to say like if I was my kind of recommendation to a candidate is to pick your top 4 and invest more time applying to 4 roles really wholeheartedly and really thoroughly than use some sort of automation process to apply to 1,000. And the data indicates that is the right way to use your time as well.
100%. I cannot agree more. And that's something that I coach people on. You know, I have blogs and videos about all this stuff, of course, but when I do get into those occasional one-on-ones, that's the first thing I ask. Like, what's your target list? What do you mean? Like, what are the top 5 companies that you really could see yourself working at? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, what are the top 5 job titles that you could effectively do tomorrow? I don't know. Like that level of like introspection and homework, I think, is missing for a lot of job seekers, unfortunately. And so that would be the first thing I would do. If I'm laid off tomorrow, well, believe me, I'm slapping that open to work banner up. You'll see it. I will not be shy about it. But I'm also going to start looking at, okay, what are the organizations around me that I could potentially believe in? I'm not super big on that. Like, there's very few companies I wouldn't work for. To be honest, my mortgage is more important than some of the other stuff. And then I want to make sure that they're actually hiring. Like, do they hire what I do? You know, if they're not big enough to need a recruiter, then that's probably pointless, but let me check that box. And then to your point, Matthew, I'm going to find those roles that really resonate. I'm going to spend time on putting my best foot forward for them. At the same time, I am going to network my tail feathers off. I'm going to make friends with the people at that company. I'm going to research. I'm going to ask for referrals. I'm going to offer help to people who work there, you know, whatever, because it takes all of those inputs. It's not just firing off 100 applications. It's not just sending emails to CEOs. Like, maybe it's a little bit of everything, but with intention. And a lot of us lack intention. And so we're firing off a million resumes, and then we're using something like that. Is it the Ladders? I don't remember what company it is, but there's something that will now apply on your behalf. And a lot of companies have questions, open-ended questions. You know, tell me about this or tell me about that. And it literally says, I've seen a million screenshots, I've used this service to apply. Please contact me for more information. And guess what? That's a one-way ticket to rejection bill. Because I'm moving on. I don't use these systems, but I'm saying for my friends that do, they're moving on to the 10 candidates behind you who actually answered those questions. It's very risky. I'm not doing it.
Amy, you've given us so much great content, but before we let you go, we close the show in the same way every time, in that the previous guest leaves a question for you. And Jim Miller over at Ashby would like to know, what is a skill that you learned in your first job that you still use today?
My first job. I'm going to give you a skill for my first recruiting job. We probably don't need to talk about how I learned to make pizzas or, you know, any of that fun stuff.
That's another episode.
Episode. I was the drive-through queen at Taco Bell, though. Let me tell you some stories about my drive-through days. No, my first recruiting job, though, I learned a really valuable lesson. Something had gone wrong. I don't remember what it was, but something had gotten messed up. And I was like trying to spin and, you know, explain and like, and my boss grabs my shoulders. Justin Nielsen, I'll never forget him. He's my VP of staffing. Grabs my shoulders. He says, Amy, repeat after me. I said, okay. He goes, I effed up. It said the whole word. Okay. And I repeated it. He's like, great. Now we can move on and fix it. And I'm like, what? Like, I was so confused for a minute. Like, what just happened? But the lesson I got from that, it didn't matter whether it was my fault or not. It didn't matter what I should or shouldn't have done. All the explanation was unnecessary. I was in charge. I was the manager of that particular branch. We made a mistake. Hey, I messed up. I'm owning it. Let's move on and fix it. And so by taking ownership And it wasn't even really an apology. Like, I guess maybe kind of like, I'm sorry that happened, but it was more about like, I'm just going to get in front of it. I'm going to own it and we're going to move on and find a solution. And I have never, ever, ever forgotten that. And I will tell you, it disarms people. They'd be like, but what? Oh, you're taking responsibility? What? Like, you know, and I have never forgotten that. And even if it's not my fault, I'll be like, you know what? My bad. I'm going to take this one. Let's move on. And it just, people like don't know what to do with that. So you shut them up.
Yeah, I completely agree. The sooner that you confront up to or confront the problem, whatever it is, the sooner you can get around to fixing it, right? And It's all about finding the solution. Like, it doesn't really matter about the problem. It's about how we can solve it, how are we going to get to the outcome that we want. And the quicker we can get to getting there, the better.
Absolutely.
Bad news ages poorly was one of the best tags I got from a CRO once, and that really read. I also love this response in like a weird post-truth world that we live in, and like, you know, not to be political, but like in a Trumpian era and a political era where we don't have accountability being modeled for us at scale. This is increasingly harder to see and find, and I absolutely love it. I think it's a really, really good response. You now have the pleasure of leaving a question for our next guest.
All right. I kind of stole this one from my friend William from the last podcast I did. He asked me this question, so I want to know, your next guest, tell me about a time that someone changed your mind online.
Ooh.
Never.
I know. He asked me that question. I'm like, what? Never. But then I had to think about it, and I was like, actually, there was once, and we had a really good discussion about it. So we'll come back and tell that story. But yeah, it's really interesting. If you really like, because that's our immediate reaction. Like, oh no, I would never. Like, I'm very strong in my convictions, and people online are wrong and dumb. And oh, well, wait, there was that once. Oh, and you really got to dig deep. You really, because we don't want to admit it. But if you really dig deep and think about it, you will find one story at least. I promise you.
I really hope that our next guest that gets this question is Joel.
Oh yeah,
that would be fun. Save it for him.
So good. We might have to save it specifically for him, because that would be a fascinating answer.
Yeah, really, really good. I had to really like humble myself with my answer to that, because I was like, oh, dang, I don't want this to be true, but it is. And here it is.
Amy, thank you so much for spending so much time with us and giving such great insight.
Thank you for having me.
And where can we find you, Amy, as ever?
recruitingin.yogapants.com. Everything Amy Miller is there.
And I'm going to go on there, and hopefully by the time this goes out, I'll see my name on the coaching.
You got list. It. First order of business.
Yeah, exactly. And as ever, if you want to hear more of this nonsense and hopefully help you navigate your kind of your job search journey, then please follow us, like, subscribe, share with your friends and family who are going through their job search, and hopefully we can help them as well. So thank you so much, Amy, again. An amazing hour. James, as ever, thank you again, and we'll catch you all next time.